As I said before, we're going to be in Ecclesiastes chapter 10. Ecclesiastes chapter 10. So in Ecclesiastes, we've been seeing Solomon say over and over again that everything is pointless. Life has no real meaning or value under the sun. Everything we try ends up going off to somebody else. All the work we do, everything that we do, ends up empty and void, like grasping after the wind. But now, as we come into the 10th chapter of Ecclesiastes, we learn a little something to help us live a better life. And he's been touching on some things to try to help us live a better life. But chapter 10 is really all about a contrast between wisdom and folly, and trying to help us understand the value of wisdom over folly. Perhaps in your life, you've had times when you felt like it made sense to do something that was foolish. I know I have plenty of times in life. Maybe it's people around you are all doing the foolish thing, and so it kind of made sense to just go along with them. Even though inside you know it's foolish, you're just kind of questioning yourself, and you're thinking, oh, maybe I should just go ahead and do it. I mean, everybody else is doing it. What's the worst that could happen? Or maybe at some points you are tempted to do something foolish, maybe buy something foolish, because you just think perhaps, maybe, that is going to be the thing that's going to give me that satisfaction. Now, deep down inside, you know it's not, but you just can't help yourself, right? You have to go after that one thing. Or you have to acquaint yourself or get around that one person, because just maybe that's the person that you really want to be around, or maybe that's the thing that will really make life happy. There's lots of reasons why we choose to do foolish things, but it always ends up hurting us in the end. And that's essentially the message that Solomon wants to give us throughout chapter 10. We're going to look at this kind of in sections and break this all down. To start with, let's look at the first 3 verses. He says, "Dead flies make the perfumer's ointment give off a stench. So a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. A wise man's heart inclines him to the right, but a fool's heart to the left. Even when the fool walks on the road, he lacks sense, and he says to everyone that he is a fool." There's a few things in this text that I find very interesting. To start off with, we might ask the question, what's so wrong with being foolish sometimes? I mean, sometimes we just really want to be foolish. We see that big shiny thing in the store, and we have the impulse, and we just have to buy it. We know it's foolish, but it makes us feel good, right? We have to go after that foolishness. Or there's somebody who's getting on our nerves, and we know we shouldn't tell them what we really think, but we just have to just let it go and see what happens. Maybe foolishness isn't so bad. But notice some of the things he brings up here that foolishness or folly results in. It ruins your wisdom. He says this kind of a picture that like a dead fly in the perfumer's ointment. You got this beautiful smelling ointment, perfume that someone has, and unknowingly they closed it up with a fly inside, and that fly dies, and the next time they open it up, it smells awful. That's the way he portrays foolishness. That all of your work and all of your diligence to acquire wisdom and to be wise and do all these good things can be completely erased, be completely ruined by just a little bit of foolishness. He tells us that foolishness outweighs wisdom. In other words, you might do a whole bunch of foolishness, and you might think that's really going to help you. That's worth a lot on the balance, on the scales of life, to get you to where you're successful and you're happy. But then you do just a little bit of foolishness, and all of a sudden the scales are just completely out of place. Not the way that you want them to be at all. Then in verse 2, he talks about the road. He says, choosing foolishness leads us in the opposite direction where we want to go. Wisdom leads you to the right, and foolishness is to the left. Foolishness is taking you away from where you want to be. It's not taking you toward where you want to be. Don't follow the path of foolishness. Follow the path of wisdom. And then third, he says, even when the fool walks on the road, he lacks sense, and he says to everyone that he is a fool. You know, a little bit of foolishness might not seem too bad, but what he says here is that foolishness ruins our lives. It destroys our honor. It destroys our reputation. It destroys our goals and our paths in life without us realizing it. Just choosing a little bit of foolishness can result in a complete change in the direction of our lives. It's not okay to think about foolishness in a passive way. We need to think about it as a serious thing, that choosing foolishness is not something small. It could be something much bigger very quickly without us realizing it. It could ruin our lives. And so foolishness is, according to Solomon, not the choice that we need to be making. Then he goes into foolishness a little bit more in this case, in this next section. He talks about foolishness on the throne, or folly, foolishness, to say the same thing. He talks about it on the throne. Look at verse 4. It says, if the anger of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your place, for calmness will lay great offenses to rest. There is an evil that I have seen under the sun, as it were an error proceeding from a ruler. Folly is set in many high places, and the rich sit in a low place. I have seen slaves on horses, and princes walking on the ground like slaves. Here's kind of a picture for us, and gets us thinking. How would you handle a situation where you're before a foolish ruler? Maybe this is talking about the ruler being foolish. It says that the anger of a ruler rises against you. Here's a man getting angry. Anger and foolishness are commonly put together. Here's a ruler getting angry with you, and he gives us advice. Don't leave your place, for calmness will lay offenses to rest. Whatever it is that you've done wrong, or whatever it is that the ruler perceives that you've done wrong, the wrong approach at that point, whenever you're being accused, he says, is to get out of your place and to start speaking rashly, speaking in a way that shows you're offended and you're defending yourself and you're fighting for your honor. He gives us the impression that if you're dealing with foolish people, a foolish ruler, you're not to defend yourself and act foolishly. That will just result in greater damage to yourself. This person is more powerful than you. Now think about this. And when you're at your jobs and you're dealing with a boss who is foolish, when you're in your house and your husband is foolish and maybe they've got the more authority, they're the head, right? Whenever you're with your parents and your parents are acting foolishly towards you, or whoever it is, the government, a law enforcement officer, whoever it is, and they're doing something foolish and they're doing something that's wrong and you don't deserve to be treated like this, he says, you do more good by remaining calm and keeping quiet. It'll lay the offenses to rest. It'll help that person to come to terms with their foolishness. I've seen this a few times when coaching. The league, whatever league I'm in, there's people that are over us, coaches that tell us the rules and all these kinds of things, and they might accuse you of things that you didn't really do. And I've seen coaches get all up in arms and fighting about it, and I've seen coaches just relax and okay, and develop the relationship, and they're respected, and their words mean something, and things are resolved much quicker than the person who fights and argues. It happens all the time, all over the place. But unfortunately, what he says next is very, very true. In verse 5, there is an evil that I've seen under the sun, as it were an error proceeding from the ruler. Then he says, folly is set in many high places. Ain't that the truth? Unfortunately, not many wise are lifted up in places of authority. It's not a requirement that you be wise in order to be given power and authority. There's no judicial system or governmental system that is established where only the wisest can rule. No, unfortunately, there are many situations, even in our own country, where government officials and bosses are not hired because of how wise they are, but they're hired because of their connections. And so here Solomon says, this is a great evil under the sun. It is what it is. This is life's situation. There is foolishness in authority over you. How are you going to deal with the foolishness that's over you? Are you going to rebel and defy, or are you going to be calm and remain in your place? And he encourages you to remain in your place and to be calm in order to have the best chance to not act foolishly or stir up the wrath of a foolish person. The next section, in verses 8 through 11, he says, "He who digs a pit will fall into it, and a serpent will bite him who breaks through a wall. He who quarries stone is hurt by them, and he who splits logs is endangered by them. If the iron is blunt and one does not sharpen the edge, he must use more strength, but wisdom helps one to succeed. If the serpent bites before it is charmed, there is no advantage to the charmer." What is this all about? This doesn't sound like foolishness, right? These are just common everyday tasks. Well, have you ever been working and done something foolish in the middle of your work that actually had great repercussions? I know I have on occasion. And maybe I've known people especially who've done that. I worked for about 3 years for my brother laying hardwood and tile and laminate flooring. And I heard about a guy who my brother used to work with who'd be doing drugs all the time. But he was on drugs one day. He came in, I think he was on painkillers or something like that, and decided to use that table saw. And he laid his 4 fingers right down on the blade as he was pushing the wood down. Cut off all 4 fingers. I mean, that's all it took. That one little instance of not paying attention, of being foolish. And that's all it took for work to be very dangerous for him. Notice in this list, this is all just common tasks. Whoever digs a pit will fall into it. Now, I mean, we've all dug things before, right? But it'd be very foolish to fall into the thing you dug. You dug it. You know where it is, you know. How could you fall into it? Well, it just takes a little bit of foolishness. A serpent will bite him who breaks through the wall. Well, I don't know how many of you have demoed a house before. I've never ran into a serpent. But here you have a careless person who's just breaking down walls and not paying attention, and there's a serpent, and it bites him. He who quarries stone is hurt by them. Not paying attention, not caring about what you're doing, and then a stone somehow lands on your hand or lands on your leg and hurts you severely. And then he changes over to a bit of wisdom, and I love this text. This is one to take home with us. Verse 10, "If iron is blunt and one does not sharpen the edge, he must use more strength." Now just picture this. Here's a foolish man who's going out into the wood as a lumberjack, and he brings with him his dull axe. And he goes out there and he starts hitting on that tree, and he's hitting on it, and he's hitting on it, and he's hitting on it all day long, and he can't cut it down because he wasn't smart enough to take 10 minutes and sharpen his axe. You see how that is just foolishness. And he says the wise person is going to sharpen his axe. And I think there's tons of applications for us as well today. I'm getting a little behind. That wisdom makes life easier, and foolishness makes life harder, and wisdom keeps us safe, and foolishness makes things dangerous. Wisdom is good for us all the time, and folly or foolishness is bad for us. He's trying to get that point across to us. There are severe consequences in life that will make your life miserable. Yeah, time and chance happens. You may be wise and you may do everything right and have everything fall apart in your life. But as a general rule, if you're wise, you're going to avoid a lot of pitfalls. And if you're foolish, you're going to suffer. Life's going to be hard for you. So foolishness is something that we certainly want to avoid. Well, what about this next one in verses 12 through 14? He says, "The words of a wise man's mouth win him favor, but the lips of a fool consume him. The beginning of the words of his mouth is foolishness, and the end of his talk is evil madness. A fool multiplies words, though no man knows what is to be, and who can tell him what will be after him? The toil of a fool wearies him, for he does not know the way. We've gone too far. Verse 14 is the end there. All right, so in this section you see the discussion is about speaking. Now, I want to show of hands. I'm wording it this way because I know y'all probably aren't going to raise your hand. Bart's already got his hands up. No. By a show of hands, who has never spoken foolishly? Oh, these kids are bold. Look at them. Look at them. Never spoken foolishly. That's right. That's good. All right. They've never spoken. Joseph, I know that you've spoken foolishly. All right. So we've all spoken foolishly. We all said things that were foolish. And so here he points this out. You know, the words of a wise man's mouth win him favor, but the lips of a fool consume him. Foolish words consume us. Speaking foolishly is destructive. And if we just start thinking about it, who do we speak foolish to? And how does it affect our relationship with them? You know, I'd have to say, I've told you all this before. First 3 years of marriage were not pretty for me and Jenna. And a lot of it had to do with this thing right here. My mouth was not very hesitant. I was not slow to speak. I was quick to speak. And that foolishness of your mouth consumes you. It destroys love with your spouse. And that bitterness as you speak destroys respect and admiration from our children. And it destroys relationships with those who are around us. Our tongues speak foolishness. And we don't understand at the moment, but it's doing us way more harm than it would ever do us good. And Solomon's trying to point this out to us. We have to be very careful about our words. If we talk as a fool, there are repercussions that we will deal with in life. I love at the end there when he talks about speaking too much. He says, a fool multiplies words, though no man knows what is to be, and who can tell him what will be after him? Do you speak too much? Do you know somebody who does? Are you kind of feeling like I'm doing that right now? You know, I mean, it's ramblings that are happening that people just keep speaking and talking about things they don't know. Notice they're trying to tell the future. Who knows what the future holds? Nobody knows what the future holds. And they're here spouting off all these things that are going to happen in the future like they know everything, but they don't know much of anything. This is the way a fool speaks, not the way a wise person speaks. A wise person speaks with humility. They don't speak with such pride and arrogance. I love Proverbs 17:28. Even a fool who keeps silent is considered wise. When he closes his lips, he's deemed intelligent. We just do better to keep our mouths shut, to stay quiet, instead of letting the foolish words come out. In Proverbs 18:2, it says, a fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. I like that too. We just have to learn to be quiet and to stop talking when we see that it's obviously consuming us. It's ruining our reputation. It's ruining our relationships. Our words cause significant damage. In the New Testament, James 3 is all about that, talking about the forest is set ablaze by the tongue, more destructive than fire. We must be very careful with what we say. And then the last section we're going to look at starts in verse 15. It says, the toil of a fool wearies him, for he does not know the way to the city. Woe to you, O land, when your king is a child and your princes feast in the morning. Happy are you, O land, when your king is the son of nobility and your princes feast at the proper time, for strength and not for drunkenness. Through sloth the roof sinks in, and through indolence the house leaks. Bread is made for laughter, and wine gladdens life, and money answers everything. Even in your thoughts do not curse the king, nor in your bedroom curse the rich, For a bird of the air will carry your voice, or some winged creature tell the matter. Notice in this text he's talking about how our foolishness makes our life difficult. It makes our life hard. Is your life really difficult? Is your life really hard right now? Well, maybe you need to examine a little bit to see if you're engaging in things that are foolish. Look at what he says in verse 15. The toil of a fool wearies him. It goes back to the axe example. Have you sharpened your axe lately? Have you taken care of the things that are going to make life easier before putting in all the effort? Or do you just go at it with all the effort you can muster? You know, in some cases, for the fool, work is harder than it should be. And we don't want to follow that example. And we need to look for others for help. Notice he says, he does not know the way to the city. What does that mean? Why is he saying that? He doesn't know how to interact with other people. You know, in those days, you go to the city to get the resources that you don't have. And here's a man who's too foolish, too lazy, too ignorant to go to the city to find help and to work together with others in order to find success in life. Fools make their lives really difficult. They're stubborn like that. And we don't want to be like that. We don't want life to be overly difficult. We want life to be a little bit easier. And it is whenever we use wisdom in order to accomplish our work, in order to do the things that we can do. And then he talks about foolish kings who waste their resources. Here's a child who's a king who feasts in the morning. Well, that in those days, they didn't have distilleries. Alcohol was a low alcohol content. And so you would have to drink all day to get drunk. And so that's a picture of them drinking and feasting all day so that by the end of the day, they're getting drunk. Well, how much work is a ruler doing if he's feasting in the morning all throughout the day? None. And so he says, it's better for the land. Happy are you, O land, when your king is the son of nobility and your princes feast at the proper time. The picture is that having foolishness makes everybody's life miserable. The land suffers from a foolish king. And he's trying to give that impression that wisdom is going to exalt a land. Wisdom is going to make everybody's life better. Wisdom is way better than foolishness. And then he brings up laziness. Through sloth, the roof sinks in. Through indolence, the house leaks. That's idleness. Someone who's lazy. If you just let things go, they're just going to deteriorate. You have to do something to maintain what you have, much less to get more. I mean, you have to do something to get more, but what you have to take care of. Your life will get harder if you don't take care of what you have, if you don't do the work that's needed. And so overall, this chapter is just really encouraging us to pursue wisdom. There's no reason for us to have such a difficult life. There's no reason for us to suffer needlessly. Pursue wisdom and let go of what is foolish. I can't stand when I do this. PowerPoint. Overall, we need to be seeking wisdom and insight. We need to be pursuing it in life because that's what God wants for us. He wants us to have good lives. He doesn't want us to live miserable lives. He doesn't want us working way harder than we ever should. He wants us to have wisdom, so he gives us wisdom. And he desires for us to pursue it and receive it. I love how throughout the New Testament we see Jesus demonstrating the wisdom of God. And we understand that is the image of God. It's not a life of foolishness, but it's a life of wisdom. That's what God calls us to, is to live wisely on the earth. And that is very, very important. But if you remember, earlier in the book, we talked about wisdom back in chapter 2. And the picture there was that wisdom is not everything. Remember, Solomon sought wisdom. Solomon asked God for wisdom, and God gave him a lot of wisdom. But he came to this determination that wisdom's not everything because in the end, the wise and the fool, they both die. So wisdom's just something that will help us get through the difficult things in life. And we should pursue them. Whenever we come into the New Testament, we see a picture of human wisdom and a picture of God's wisdom. And those who have human wisdom look at the wisdom of God and think, oh, that's foolish, because they're proud of all that they've acquired. And so we understand that human wisdom is not as important as God's wisdom. There's something even more important than just wisdom in general. There's God's wisdom, the understanding that God has that the weaker things are greater than those things that appear strong. And we need to study, and we need to pray to find God's wisdom and not man's wisdom. And I hope that we all can do that together. That's why we gather to study. We talked about this morning. We study together. We encourage one another. We pray together. We pray for wisdom and knowledge and insight to be given, understanding to be given to one another. And God, some way, somehow, works in our lives to give us that wisdom and knowledge and understanding. And that should be what we're desiring in our lives. Not just so that we can have an easy life here, but so that our life can be lived to the fullest for God's glory. So that we can use whatever resources God gives us to glorify God and to serve His people and to serve those who are seeking Him. And that's ultimately our desire in life. I hope that this text helps you. I love Ecclesiastes. I love this chapter and the discussion about wisdom and foolishness. I hope that you can consider maybe something in your life that you could do a little bit better and to avoid foolishness, and not think about foolishness as something that's okay in certain situations, but to think of it as something that can have dire consequences in life. It can ruin us if we pursue it. There's one choice that we must make that is the wise choice. And that is to receive the grace that God offers to each and every one of us. It's very foolish to turn away and to resist the will of God and the desires of God after all that He's done for us and all that He's demonstrated in giving us His Son. And if you're here tonight and you have not yet accepted Him to be your Savior, and you've not yet submitted your life to Him, we want to encourage you and help you in any way we can. Will you please let us know what you need? Please come forward as we stand and as we sing.